Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about why this matchup with the Cleveland Guardians is a really big series for the Phillies. And not just because of the record, because of the way that Cleveland is playing right now. We'll get into it on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out. We come to you live as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out. You may know me from some of my other work as a host on 97.5 The Fanatic. I've been working over there for about 5 years now, 3 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member, and 3 years as your host of Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. They're the reliable way to get parts fast for your next plumbing, h-vac, or electrical job. And you can get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. The Phillies have a really big series against the Cleveland Guardians. Now, the Guardians are kind of weird, right? Because ahead of the season, no one had them being as good as they were going to be. As we see them now at 61-41. No one was looking at the Cleveland Guardians like, oh, this team's going to have a fair claim for one of the best teams in baseball. Like, no, that wasn't an expectation. At this point, with them tied for second best record in baseball with the Baltimore Orioles, ahead of teams like the Dodgers and the Braves and the Yankees, you would have been like, no way Cleveland is that good before the season. And yet, as we sit here on July 25th, or is it the 26th? 26th. Don't even know what day it is. Cleveland is very darn good at baseball, folks. And yet, if I asked you to name like 3 players on the Cleveland Guardians, I'd imagine most Phillies fans would struggle. And not just because interleague play, because you're looking at a team that doesn't exactly have that star power the way that you see with the Phillies or the Dodgers or the Yankees, or the Braves, those other great teams in baseball that you kind of expected to be here. So that's a big point for the Philadelphia Phillies to focus on. They're going to really need to make sure that they zone in this series. They haven't been playing well. Another reason why this is big, the Guardians have kind of been scuffling. They lost 2 of 4 to the Tigers. They split that 4-game set. They lost 2 of 3 to the Padres. They lost 2 of 3 to the Rays. They lost prior to that 3 of 4 to the Tigers. Like, the Guardians have been struggling lately. They haven't won a series since they played the Giants back on July 5th, 6th, and 7th. We're now on the 26th of July. See, I got it right the second time. So just like the Phillies haven't been playing their best baseball, the Guardians have not been playing their best baseball. And things are getting a little bit tighter with them in division out there in the American League Central. The Twins are only 4.5 games back. Meanwhile, the Phillies, we talked about it yesterday, 9.5 games up on the Atlanta Braves. So Cleveland's feeling the pressure. If you think the Phillies are the only team coming into the series saying, hey, we really need to get right, Cleveland is doing that as well. Also, when you look at the Philadelphia Phillies home record, they're 37-16. I know 27-22 away is a solid mark, but you really like how good this team has been has almost overshadowed how dominant they've been at home. They have the most wins at home in baseball. They have been flat out unbelievable at Citizens Bank Park, and that's where the setting for today's game is. They've won 3 more games at Citizens Bank Park than any other team in baseball has won at their home ballpark. And when you look at Cleveland on the road, right, they're 33-15 at home. Pretty darn good mark. They have less losses at home than the Philadelphia Phillies do. They're 28-26 on the road. They're basically a 500 team when you take them away from their home ballpark. So a couple of things that point in the Phillies' direction when it comes to this matchup in the series. So let's go ahead and take a peek at how the pitching matchups are going to stand up and who you're going to see in this series tonight. You've got a 6:40 p.m. start with Christopher Sanchez on the mound for the Philadelphia Phillies. Ben Lively toes the rubber for the Cleveland Guardians. Another righty that you're seeing. You've been seeing a good amount of righties. Unfortunately for the Phillies, it hasn't paid dividends offensively the way it normally does. This team normally crushes righties. Lately, they haven't really crushed anybody offensively. But Sanchez has been really good all year long on the mound. Lively is 8-6 with a 3.57 ERA, a 1.19 whip, something I always love to see, especially with a Phillies team that does like the home run occasionally. In 93 and a third innings pitched, Lively has only struck out 80 batters. He has given up 15 home runs. Just for a comparison, Christopher Sanchez has given up 3 home runs in 16 more innings. Like, it's just, he's been dominant. Sanchez has been. Lively is gettable. He's a solid pitcher. He's got a lively arm. But he's good enough that the Phillies are not going to be able to just roll into this and say, well, we've got an easy day in game 1. I'd expect the Phillies to win game 1 on the pitching matchup alone. This is a mismatch, and that's why they're minus 180 favorites on the money line. That's why they're 61.8% chance to win, according to the ESPN analytics. The Phillies are in good shape in game 1, but you're going to have a Tyler Phillips game, and part of me feels like in game 2, Tyler Phillips against Carlos Carrasco, who is not the guy he used to be. He's 3-8 this year with a 5.32 ERA. It's probably a great time for Tyler Phillips to throw because Carrasco is going to be the most gettable pitcher you see in this series. I don't know what's going on with the Guardians and him still being in the rotation. I'm imagining they're going to want to try and add at the deadline to their starting rotation, but we know Cookie Carrasco and his legacy in this game and in that city. I understand why they still have him in the rotation. Tyler Phillips has made 2 starts in his major league career. He's won both of them. He's got a 2.81 ERA. Does the kid have the magical run continuing? We'll find out in Saturday's game. And then the final matchup of this series on Sunday, you got yourself a day game. Ranger Suarez is going to be on the mound, and he's going to be facing off against Xavier Curry. And Xavier Curry, in his career, has only thrown 126 innings at the major league level. This year, he's only thrown 21 2/3 innings at the major league level. Cleveland's dealing with some issues in the rotation right now. You're facing 3 righties in this series. There is no reason the offense should not be able to get going. Cleveland's team is good. They can create offense. We'll talk about their hitters in just a second, but the pitching matchups are so in favor of the Phillies. They're favored in every game by the ESPN analytics and on the money line. Go ahead and take care of business if you're the Philadelphia Phillies. You should expect 2 of 3 games won by the Philadelphia Phillies in this series. We never fight for a sweep. Well, we don't fight for a sweep. We never expect a sweep, especially when you're playing the second best team in record in baseball. But man, do they have a good opportunity to get things right at home. If you get out of this series losing it to the Guardians with all of this in your favor, I'm going to be a little bit more worried about the Phillies than I already said I was in yesterday's episode. But Cleveland has some real offensive talent. They do. You know about Jose Ramirez and what he brings to the plate. I mean, you saw him in the home run derby. He's got 24 bombs on the year. That's 1 more than Bryce Harper. He's also batting .273, so it's not like he's a guy that you can just strike out a bunch or he homers a bunch. He's also got 82 RBIs. That's 11 more than Alec Bohm. Bohm has cooled off since his red-hot first couple months of the season, but still, to have 82 ribbies before July's over is an amazing mark for Jose Ramirez. He is their guy. Oh, by the way, in addition to Jose Ramirez, they also have Steve Kwan, who is batting .341 and I believe still leading the American League in average. He's been really, really good at putting bat on baseball this year. That's a dangerous twosome right there. And that's not even the full complement of their lineup. You look at some of the other guys on their team. Josh Naylor, 22 bombs himself. By the way, Stephen Kwan has left the yard 10 times, so it's not just an average for him. He can also hurt you with a little bit of pop. That's kind of where this team is, though, with those 3 guys, Kwan, Ramirez, Naylor. Outside of them, there's no one in this lineup that you really look at as a major, major sticking point where it's like, oh, this is a big name. I recognize that name. I know he's having a good year. That being said, 3 stars is sometimes all you need. You get a bomb from one, a double from the other, a single from another. The next thing you know, you got yourself 2 runs, maybe more if other guys get on base. Here's one of the keys to this series. It's not letting those 3 guys hurt you. This is not a very deep lineup that the Guardians boast. I think they're a gettable lineup if you avoid letting those guys hurt you. The problem is those 3 guys are having amazing seasons in Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez and Stephen Kwan. It's hard to work around them because you're looking at all of them batting near the top of the order. You don't want to load up the bases or put too many guys on for lesser hitters because at that point you put the pressure on your defense. Like at some point you'll have to attack them, and they're not Babe Ruth. You can get these guys out, but it is a tall task when you look at the strength of the Philadelphia Phillies and their pitching staff and what they have to do against the strength of the Cleveland Guardians, which is those top three guys in the Cleveland Guardians lineup. Well, top three guys, I mean skill-wise. And actually, I've got some breaking news. The Philadelphia Phillies have made a trade, and we're going to look at what exactly that trade is. This is coming across right now, so scrap the rest of the show. We've previewed what we needed to preview. We've got a trade, and I'll tell you what that is coming up next as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Wow, I got to collect my thoughts, but talk about if you get traded at the deadline, you might need accommodations at a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a vacation rental at some point while you wait to find your final home, or maybe you're just traveling to watch baseball. Check out Booking.com, Booking.yeah. With summer travel heating up, especially travel for baseball games, it's time to explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about. Yeah, we're talking about your rivals' cities. Again, hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. Well, you might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your rivals like Atlanta, Miami, Washington, New York. Go ahead and check it out. Book today on Booking.com on the site, or you can check it out in the Booking.com app. So go ahead and check out our friends over at Booking.com. Let's also talk about FanDuel because I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But with basketball done, hockey done, football not started yet, the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with America's #1 sportsbook. This is incredible. Folks, we have breaking news here on Locked On Phillies. The Phillies have made a trade. It includes a reliever and not a reliever coming back to the Philadelphia Phillies. This is a trade between, as Jeff Passan puts out in his tweet, I'll read you the tweet verbatim. Trade news. Double hyphen, between two teams that could be facing one another in the World Series this year. The Philadelphia Phillies have acquired outfielder Austin Hayes and will be sending reliever Seranthony Dominguez and center fielder Cristian Pache to the Baltimore Orioles. Did not see this coming remotely. There's so much to break down with this, so much to break down. Now, I know you want to know about Austin Hayes, and we're going to get to that, but I'm going to be honest, I'm going to have to pull up his baseball reference page and talk to you a little bit more in depth about Austin Hayes. He was not someone I had on my radar for the Phillies. But what does this say about other stuff the Phillies are going to look to do? Well, you move Seranthony Dominguez. You're really going to need to add another reliever now, maybe two. That kind of opens the door for more trades to be made. Cristian Pache, it sucks to see him go. It does, because I'm not saying like, oh, he was a great player, this kills the Phillies, but there were flashes, right? We know why Seranthony Dominguez goes. He's been struggling the past 2 years. He had a great time in Philadelphia at points. He wasn't really getting the job done. If you're going to upgrade at the bullpen, there are going to be guys that have to end up in the minors or moved, and Seranthony Dominguez was probably one of the odd men out. When we were running through the bullpen yesterday, I forgot about him, honestly. So it makes sense. And the Pache thing makes sense too. With Austin Hayes coming here, you've got an outfield spot that you need to open up. It just, I always believed that Pache had more in the tank than what he had shown. The ceiling feels very high when you watch him play, but the floor is very, very low. And he never came quite close to reaching that ceiling. So best of luck to both of those guys down there in Baltimore with Seranthony Dominguez and Pache heading in the trade. Austin Hayes, this is going to be very interesting how he fits into the outfield with the Philadelphia Phillies already on the roster. So the outfielders you still have on the roster: Weston Wilson, not a steady piece, but Weston Wilson, Brandon Marsh, Johan Rojas, Nick Castellanos, and I guess we can count Kyle Schwarber, even though he's going to DH for the rest of forever. But Austin Hayes is an interesting option. He's a righty. Of course, you didn't even have to look at the baseball reference page to know he was a righty. The Philadelphia Phillies were always looking to add right-handed bats in the outfield. He's 29 years old, so not too old, not too young. He's arbitration eligible in 2025, so you have another year of team control with him, so that's a good thing. He's been an all-star once in his career. It was 2023. Here's what he did in that season where he was an all-star in 2023. He had 275 with 16 home runs, 36 doubles. He's had 35 doubles in 2022, 36 doubles in 2023. So that gap-to-gap kind of pop is good. 60 RBIs in 2022, 67 RBIs in 2023. So as far as the ability at the plate, he's a guy that, I mean, he hits lefties really well. He was an all-star last year. Okay, I tried to sell you on Whit Merrifield being an all-star last year, and that's a reason for acquiring him. So I don't know that goes as far anymore with Phillies fans as it did before the season. Here's what he's doing so far this year. He's batting .255 with 3 home runs. Hasn't really got a lot of opportunities. He's only played in 63 games so far this year. The Orioles are very good. He's a guy that I guess just kind of got lost in the shuffle down there in Baltimore with that team being as talented as they are. 175 plate appearances. He's only walked 9 times, so struck out 40 times. That's not a great sign. I do not love that at all. A strikeout guy, I've got to imagine a lot of those are against righties, though. The platoon numbers, because he will undoubtedly be a platoon with either Brandon Marsh or Yohan Rojas, and being that he's a righty, it seems like it would make the most sense that he would platoon with Brandon Marsh. Now, I'm going to go through his splits for just 2024. Actually, let's go through his career splits and see what he does against left-handed batters. So I'm going to show handedness against pitcher, and we're going to see what we've got as far as that. Sorry, I'm doing this, honestly, on the fly here when it comes to evaluating this. I got to find the lefty-righty here. When it comes to the pitching and how he does. But I'd imagine that when you're looking at his lefty-righty splits, you'd be seeing a guy that hits significantly better against left-handed pitchers. And here's the stats right now for the career. Against right-handed pitchers, he's a .256 hitter. He's a .272 hitter against left-handed pitchers. So about almost 20 points better against lefties. Can kind of do it against both. Home runs, he's hit more against righties than he has against lefties. 43 home runs against right-handed pitchers, 23 against left-handed pitchers in his career. He's had more games against right-handed pitchers, though. So you've got the potential to match that up with Brandon Marsh, match Hayes up. I want to see what he's doing this year in the batting splits as well with the platoon stuff. This year against righties, he's hitting .204. This year, this is what it is, right? This year against righties, Austin Hayes is hitting .204. This year against lefties, he's hitting .328. That's an unbelievable mark. He also, he only has 3 home runs this season, but 1 against lefties, 2 against righties. I mean, that's not that big of a deal. 21 strikeouts against lefties, 19 against righties. I love that split in averages. The Philadelphia Phillies are banking on him to be able to field his position well in the outfield, in left, as part of a platoon system with Brandon Marsh, and hit the ever-living you-know-what out of left-handed pitchers. Lefties, you'll get Hayes. Righties, you'll get Marsh. I think that's a pretty solid platoon out there in left. Now, it doesn't answer your question in center field. Rojas, is he an everyday player out there? We do not know. Not sure yet where the Phillies stand on that. They could make another move for a starting outfielder. We know they're going to have to make moves to the bullpen. So this is just the first move. Stuff isn't done yet. Is this a fair trade for the Philadelphia Phillies? Well, Pache was never really going to play here, right? So Pache is kind of just that throw-in piece. Seranthony Dominguez, can't find it. If the Orioles can get him to work his problems out, he's a valuable arm. But I don't know that they'll be able to do that. The Phillies have had trouble, and Caleb Cotham has proven himself to be a capable pitching coach here in Philadelphia. So when I look at this trade, I say, did Baltimore get better? Marginally. Did the Phillies get better? Marginally. They both got points of need. They're both kind of risky, and I don't know. I don't have any issue from either side of this trade. This is a setup transaction to now open the floodgates for what the Phillies are doing the rest of the way, whether it's another outfielder, a couple of relievers, because now you need a couple of relievers. Oh, man, a lot to break down. We're going to talk about now how this – I'm going to collect my thoughts, and we're going to dive into what this means for the rest of the trade deadline for the Philadelphia Phillies and what this shows about Dave Dombrowski's strategy. I'm surprised they made a move this quick, but hey, trade deadline heats up quickly. I told you about this. Moves could happen anytime, and we just saw one there as I record this episode. So you'll get pretty quick reaction on this. You're probably going to be able to watch this episode within 30 minutes of this trade getting done. Whew. Some big stuff happening on today's episode of Locked On Phillies. We'll continue to break it down next as we wrap up today's episode. Let's talk about our title sponsor first, though. SupplyHouse.com. You can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Well, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com/TM, and you can order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks with our friends over at SupplyHouse.com. All right. Whew. So now that I've collected my thoughts a little bit, what does the Austin Hays acquisition say about where the Philadelphia Phillies are at? Well, one, it says that the Phillies had done enough evaluating in the outfield to know that Cristian Pache was not a long-term answer here or even a long-term player that was going to get enough playing time. It just didn't seem to make sense to have Pache, who is basically a carbon copy of Rojas, and he hasn't hit as well. Like, that just doesn't make sense to have two of those guys. So understood why they evaluated that. Dominguez, it means the Philadelphia Phillies are ready to cut bait with guys in the bullpen that are not performing. This feels similar to the Whit Merrifield thing. I would have guessed that Seranthony Dominguez was a player that the Philadelphia Phillies would keep and say, hey, we're going to believe in your stuff and hope that you can figure out how to locate it better, build that confidence back up. We've been talking on and off all year about Seranthony Dominguez, and I think it's a crisis of confidence. Maybe a change of scenery is what he needed, but he wasn't getting the job done here in Philly. So now I wonder, when you look at Dominguez going, and no prospects in this trade that I've seen, that's interesting. You haven't dipped into the farm system. You basically moved two major league players for one major league player. So not only do you have a roster spot open that'll have to be filled before today's game, maybe two, depending on how quick Austin Hays can get here. I don't know if he'll be available for tonight's game or not. 6:40 p.m. first pitch. It's 12:47 Eastern time right now. Can he get here in a couple hours and then get on the field and be ready to play? And would Rob Thompson really play him? Well, you're facing a righty tonight. So you're going to see Brandon Marsh out there anyway, but would he be available to pinch hit? I don't know how any of that works. You'll probably have to elevate someone from Lehigh Valley in addition to filling out the roster, even if Austin Hays can go. If Austin Hays can't go tonight, you'll need to bring two guys up, I guess. You got two open roster spots. So a lot of movement could happen to set things up. Here's what I see the rest of the way. I'd be surprised if this is the only outfield move. It doesn't feel splashy enough. And I don't know that there's anything too splashy, but with Pache going, you've upgraded in one position, but I don't think Weston Wilson is going to be a guy who's on this team long-term throughout the rest of the season and the postseason. That means you have another outfield spot that you can upgrade at. Who is that? Could it be a Lane Thomas? Could it be a bigger move and you get a starting center fielder or a guy that you could place out there like, I don't know, Jazz Chisholm, Luis Robert, Brent Rooker? Could you get one of those guys still? Could you spend prospects that you haven't used yet? You have not taken yourself out of the market for a splashy player with this Austin Hays deal. So that's a good thing by Dave Dombrowski. I imagine that's why this move was made when it was, because you say, okay, we'll shore up that first and still leave ourselves open for the big move. You now need two relievers. If you don't get two relievers, this bullpen is shaky at best. No, that's not true. Okay. If you don't get two relievers, this bullpen seems shaky. At best, they're very good. But right now they feel shaky. So you need to replace Seranthony Dominguez's spot. That's not going to come internally. Unless you're counting on Spencer Turnbull to be a guy in the bullpen when he recovers, but he's not going to be back until what? Mid-August? Maybe September? It's going to be a while till Spencer Turnbull's able to throw again. You're not going to do that with just minor league arms coming up. Junior Marte is already not cutting it. I don't know. You got to acquire two guys at the deadline that can help you in the pen. So two bullpen arms, not more. They haven't acquired one yet. And potentially another outfielder seems to be still on the docket for the Philadelphia Phillies. I would imagine, right? This would be my guess, because I'm in the camp that the Phillies aren't going to make too splashy of a move. But I do think when the dust settles, one of the top 10 prospects in the Philadelphia Phillies farm system will no longer be with the organization. That means that you're going to get a valuable piece from some team somewhere. Will it be a reliever? Seems more likely now that you acquired an outfielder. I told you to, listen, remember back, right? I told you that reliever is now my top priority for this team over outfield. It seems that Dave Dombrowski might feel the same way. Austin Hayes is a solid acquisition. I have no problem with the player. We'll have to see how he fits here. I'm not completely familiar with his game, but I'm familiar enough to know, based on those splits and based on the little bit of Baltimore Orioles baseball that I've watched, that he's a capable player in the right situation. He's a split-time player. Could you go out and get another top-level outfielder? One of those high, crown jewel guys of this year's trade deadline? You could move prospects though. Sometimes ahead of trade deadlines, right? This is the ultimate takeaway for me. Sometimes before trade deadlines, you make a move that takes you out of the market for any other moves. You use your top prospects. You trade a player that a lot of teams are interested in. It is your final move, cut dead right there. We've done what we wanted to do. This is not that for the Philadelphia Phillies. Dave Dombrowski's not done. How many trades do we see Dave Dombrowski make ahead of the deadline? Because this is already one that he's made, and we're on July 26th. We got 3 more days until we even reach the trade deadline. I'm going to set the over-under at 3.5 trades. What are you thinking? 3.5 trades. Now, let's go 3.5 players acquired at the major league level, because you could do, we talked about it yesterday, a combination Lane Thomas, and why am I forgetting the name of the guy that you could acquire? My mind is racing a million times a minute, from the Washington Nationals bullpen arm down there that we talked about yesterday. You could go ahead and get multiple guys from the same team, is the way that I should put it. I don't know if they do that, but I'm going to take the over on 3.5 players acquired. I'm going to say that when the dust settles, Dave Dombrowski will have acquired 4 players for this baseball team, 2 outfielders, 2 relievers. Heck, you might even consider thinking about a starter at this point to fill out the final spot in the rotation. Maybe a low-level regular season addition like Michael Lorenzen was last year that could turn into a bullpen arm. Maybe one of those bullpen arms that you acquire is a swing guy that could start or relieve. We've seen it a couple years in a row now for the Phillies. Turnbull, Lorenzen, Strom. They've had a bunch of guys do that. There's no restrictions on what the Phillies can do based on this move. So that's a great thing. And you found your platoon mate for Brandon Marsh, so the outfield looks a little bit more productive. At the end of the day, did this team get better from this trade? Absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the Philadelphia Phillies are better now than when I started this podcast episode. And maybe when you get new life in the clubhouse, you start to get to a point where you're like, okay, this will hype us up a little bit. You didn't move any the key clubhouse guys. Pache was a good dude. Seranthony was a good dude, but you didn't really hear them as oh, these are the guys that lead our clubhouse. These are guys that we can't move on from. I don't know. It's just a fun setup move for Dave Dombrowski that now has my mind churning as far as what the Philadelphia Phillies can do next. So my apologies. Sorry that everything was kind of a bit jumbled. I was not expecting to get mid-episode a notification of a trade that I had no idea was coming. So I did my best to go ahead and break that down for you. Hopefully that explains why they made the move, what they gave up, what they still can do, and where Dave Dombrowski is mentally at. But that's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. And on top of all of that, we got a baseball game to play tonight. The Phillies are hosting the second best team in baseball by record. I love this time of year. Go ahead and stay locked in on Locked On Phillies over the weekend. We'll be posting shorts when other moves get done. No more full episodes till Monday, unless something like crazy happens. But I'll be posting shorts on YouTube that you can go ahead and check out for immediate reactions to moves. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube. Again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Monday, we'll have a more in-depth episode on everything the Phils do over the weekend. I'd expect more moves to come. But that's all for today's episode. I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next Locked On Phillies.